Well, as Love and Kisses once sang, thank God it's Friday. Friday night once again with Dean Kirk back on the countdown with a dance record at number 19, up 5 from 24, A Forgotten 45 by Natalie Cole with Jumpstart. Fancy playlist of August 29th, 1987. Boy, I put this song getting it on up there into the top 20 on this fancy playlist, but it died pretty quick. That's the thing this is just one example of the frustrations I ran into back in the day, and still to some extent to this day. You see, the thing about Jumpstart was it was a hit. It was a hit for a while, a couple of months. It was a comeback record for Natalie Cole. This would be her first hit. Actually, it was her first, it might have been her first big R&B hit in 5 or 6 years. And her first pop hit went to number 13 on Billboard's Hot 100. Be her first Hot 100 top 20 hit, and gosh, since 1978 or 79. But it was quickly forgotten. It was overshadowed by an even bigger hit from the album. The album was called Everlasting, her 11th album, by the way, which was Pink Cadillac, a Bruce Springsteen song that she covered. She did a dynamite version, boy. She turned that thing into a dance floor classic right there. Pink Cadillac, great hook in that record, too, that she furnished as well. Although Bruce Springsteen, he had that hook, too. But still, she preserved a lot of the spirit of that record right there, Pink Cadillac. But let's go back to Jumpstart at number 19 on my fantasy playlist. First off, a little bit of history on Natalie Cole. Of course, everybody knows that she's the daughter of Nat King Cole. She started a little bit late in the music business. She didn't really start singing seriously until she was a senior at the University of Massachusetts. And when she graduated in 1974, she got a degree in child psychology, but she did some singing in some local nightclubs. And she was discovered, or she met a couple of producers, a couple of big people behind the scenes. She met Chuck Jackson along with Marvin Yancey. Marvin Yancey and Chuck Jackson, they were in a band. They were an R&B band that was popular back in the early to mid-70s on R&B charts. The Independents. They were in the band called the Independents. They had an R&B crossover. They had a pop crossover in 1973 called Leaving Me. Well, they were off on their own, these two guys, in 1975, Chuck Jackson and Marvin Yancey. They got together with Natalie Cole. They wrote and they produced her first album, Inseparable. They produced it. They produced it in Curtis Mayfield's studio. And that got her a record deal with Capitol Records. So she was on a roll. Natalie Cole was on a roll for several years. This will be an everlasting love in 1975. And then there was the funky, sophisticated lady in 1976. I got love on my mind in 1977. And I tell you what, she was quite capable of versatility. That's one thing I like about her and appreciate her now. Of course, she did these ballads like Miss You Like Crazy, which came out in 1989, and she could go really funky, kind of strut a little bit, and sophisticated lady. Boy, I remember that back in the summer of 1976. Not many of the pop stations would play it, but I do remember hearing the song on, of all stations, if I remember correctly, a station called WCPC out of Houston, Mississippi, not too far from Tupelo. It was a 50,000 watt AM flamethrower right in the middle of nowhere. But later on, I heard they had a nice studio, though. They had a classy affair over there, but still, I heard that song over there, and they covered, that station covered, must have covered at least a lot of East Mississippi and North and Central West Alabama, but that's beside the point. But she would do Sophisticated Lady, and then she'd come out with an adult contemporary hit as a follow-up, so more of a traditional sounding record, Mr. Melody, which did okay on adult contemporary, top 20 on adult contemporary, and then, now she fell off in the early 80s. She had a drug problem. And but she sobered up, And she started making a comeback in the mid 80s. So we got, she came out with that album, Everlasting, in 1986, 1987 off of Manhattan Records. And boy, now Jumpstart's a commercial sounding record, although admittedly Pink Cadillac is even more commercial. Now here's the deal about Jumpstart is that 80s backbeat. This is a rhythmic barn burner fed by that Big Bertha iconic 80s backbeat, that drum beat, boom, boom, boom. Boy, if that don't gravitationally attract you to the dance floor, then nothing will. I tell you what. Woo, boy, it was a jam right there. It's just a shame that it was quickly forgotten. I don't think not that many people remember the song Jumpstart. Well, guess who wrote and produced the record? At least who produced it? Reggie and Vincent Calloway. The Callaways, and you might remember the Callaways had hit their own, which was, what was the name of that record? Dadgummit. Having one of those mental things. It was in the spring of I Want to Be Rich, I believe was the name of it, back in the spring of 1990. But before that, the Callaways, they were in Midnight Star. Remember Midnight Star? They formed Midnight Star. The band started in 1975 at the University of Kentucky. And you remember the early 80s, boy, they were popping it out. Freakazoid, No Parking on the Dance Floor. And let's see, what was another one they did? Oh gosh, Midas Touch was fantastic. I love that song. And there was Operator, but they had another one. I'm trying to remember the other one that they did. Well, that's beside the point. It might come to me later. But anyway, here's the deal about they had that original, they had sort of an original sound, Midnight Star. Calloway, Reggie Calloway, he would use to synthesize beats. He fused that R&B and pop. And you got Vincent Calloway on the vocoder, you know, when that high-pitched voice, no parking, baby, no parking on the dance floor. Something I sound like a granny. I can't do a vocoder. I just don't have that kind of talent, that kind of vocal talent. But anyway, they brought some of that sensibility, that fusion of funk and R&B and dance into Jumpstart. Reggie Calloway, how about that, folks? Okay. Well, the song went to number 13 on Billboard's Hot 100, in case I didn't mention it already. It went to number 2 on R&B, Jumpstart. Now, the song, I got to tell you something else, though, that blew me away. Ooh, boy, I like to get at these songwriters. Yeah, baby. She came out with a ballad after that. Lord, I haven't heard that record in ages. I Live for Your Love. Now, according to Wikipedia, it was written by Dennis Lambert. And I'm thinking that's the same Dennis Lambert. He partnered with Brian Potter back in the 70s. They produced. They might have also wrote Don't Pull Your Love Out on Me, Baby by Hamilton, Joe, Frank, and Reynolds back in the summer of 1971. They did that. And I need to read up a little bit more about these guys. Now, they teamed up with the Four Tops, and they produced Ain't No Woman Like the One I Got. That's right. Dennis Lambert and Brian Potter, they produced that for the Four Tops, fall of 72, and then they produced the follow-up to that record, the winter of 72 and 73, one of my favorite records by the Four Tops, Keeper of the Castle, back in the day. Tavares, they produced It Only Takes a Minute by Tavares, but they're fang, and they engineered a comeback record by the Righteous Brothers, where they produced Rock and Roll Heaven back in the summer of 74, and they wrote and produced, they didn't write the song, but they produced Rhinestone Cowboy by Glenn Campbell, and they wrote and produced a follow-up to that song, Country Boy, You Got Your Feet in L.A., and You're Still in, or something, back in 1976. Boy, it's just such a joy to find this stuff out. A book needs to be written about Brian Potter and Dennis Lambert. There was a big write-up in Billboard magazine. I forgot what year it was in. I think it was either in 76 and 77 on Brian Potter and Dennis Lambert. Now, Dennis Lambert, he later did some solo. He did some solo stuff on his own in the 80s. I think one of his production credits is Dennis Edwards. Don't Look Any Further. Remember, Don't Look Any Further by Dennis Edwards back in 1985, I believe. Woo, boy, I tell you what. Well, that's it on that. I'm done. So we've got the hit roster off the Everlasting album. Now you got to understand. There's a whole bunch of people who produced this album, and she's covered some songs that was written by Burt Bacharach and Hal David on this album. And boy, you just got a range of people from the Callaways, who formerly a Midnight Star, all the way to the legends going back to the early '60s. Hal David and Burt Bacharach, all those songs that they wrote for Dionne Warwick back in the '60s, and the versatility. That's it. Right on, spin that thing right on the dot. Versatility. That is Natalie Cole. Back in the day. Jumpstart, number 19, up 5 from 24 on this fancy playlist. August 29th, 1987.